What was that tapping sound just beyond the windshield? Why did it feel like something was scratching at the edges of my mind? And what would you do if you woke up to find you weren't alone on a deserted road? If you're watching this alone, maybe don't, but if you're into true horror, subscribe and we'll keep you up tonight. About 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion late at night. I'd spent the evening laughing around a creaky picnic table, swapping old stories and feasting on Uncle Roger's famous ribs. But duty called. I had work early the next morning, so I passed on couch space and set out on the 2-hour drive. The highway narrowed into a country road, flanked on both sides by thick woods that pressed their dark silhouettes against my headlights. Those were the woods you see in horror movies, the kind that swallow sound and swallow light, leaving you feeling like a mouse scuttling through a labyrinth. The air inside my car was stifling. My eyelids grew heavier with every mile. The hum of the engine began to sound like a lullaby I couldn't resist. You know that sudden, bone-deep exhaustion that sneaks up without warning? That's exactly what hit me about 45 minutes in. One moment I was alert, tuning the radio between static and faint old rock. The next, I was fighting to keep my head from bobbing forward. I scanned for a rest stop, a 24-hour gas station, anything. But those roads were empty, save for the occasional pair of headlights gliding past. Finally, desperation overrode caution. I drifted to the shoulder, eased onto the grass behind a cluster of low bushes, and cut the engine. My phone read 11:22 p.m. I took a deep breath, reminded myself I wasn't planning to stay long, just long enough to grab 20 minutes of shut-eye. I nestled the steering wheel against my chest and let the darkness carry me away. Some time later, I jerked awake to a scratching noise. Dull, intermittent taps against the metal roof. I checked the clock, 11:50. The noise stopped after a few seconds, and I convinced myself it was an animal. Maybe a raccoon or a possum investigating the undercarriage. Too tired to investigate, I drifted back to sleep. When I woke again, the clock read 12:40. The tapping had returned, more insistent this time, like fingernails running along glass. My heart lurched. I sat up, scanning the trees beyond the windshield. Moonlight was thin, stars smothered by shifting clouds, and the woods seemed to pulse just outside the glass. Another tap, then soft scuttling. I flicked on the dome light and peered through the rear window. For a split second, I saw something, skin stretched taut over a skeleton, limbs too long, moving with unnatural speed. Then it bolted into the trees. Cold sweat beaded at my temples. What would you do in this situation? Drop your answer in the comments, because this next part, it gets worse. I slammed the light off and swallowed hard. My mind raced. Was the thing in the woods a prankster, a hunter, something else? I had to get out of there. Hands shaking, I jammed the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I peeled back onto the road. The headlights carved through the darkness, and my pulse thundered in my ears. 100 yards up, at a curve that bent around a thicket of oaks, I saw a car parked on the shoulder, driver's side door wide open. My stomach twisted. I slowed, scanning the empty seat. Whoever it was had vanished. Against my better judgment, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing but darkness. Then a howl. A low, breathy shout that sounded like a man's voice twisted into a howl. Before I could register it, a silhouette hurtled around the bend. He sprinted straight toward me, eyes wide, mouth yanking open in a silent scream I could almost hear. Hey! Hey you! Get the fuck out of your car. Now! Instinct took over. I slammed my foot on the gas, tires squealing on loose gravel. The other car's headlights flickered and died behind me. I flew down the road, clutching the wheel as if my life depended on it, because it did. I didn't stop until the woods fell away and I burst onto the brightly lit highway, where other cars streamed past like phantoms, none of the drivers looking my way. I never saw that man again. No patrol car, no police sirens, no news reports of a missing driver on that forgotten stretch of road. When I explained what happened to my friends, they chalked it up to exhaustion, a prank, or a hallucination, the classic highway hypnosis. But I know what I saw. I know what screamed at me in the dark and vanished into the trees. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt fingernails dragging across my skull. My phone buzzed at odd hours with blank texts. I'd wake to see the words, "You left me," blinking on the screen, but no sender. Eventually, I quit that route. I drove 2 hours longer on a well-lit interstate just to avoid those woods. But it didn't help. The woods seeped into my dreams. I'd find myself behind that wheel, the bushes looming, and the clock clicking toward 11:22. I'd wake in a sweat, convinced the scratching was right outside my bedroom window. And here's the thing. Part of me wants to dismiss it all, the isolation, the fatigue, the racing mind. But my gut tells me something darker happened that night. Something alive, something hungry for fear. Maybe it was just a deranged hitchhiker, or maybe the woods themselves are alive, feeding on the exhaustion of travelers. I'll never know. All I'm certain of is that if you ever feel that sudden, bone-crushing tiredness on a lonely road, don't pull over. Keep going. Because sometimes the real monsters aren't hiding under your bed. They're waiting behind the wheel. If you made it to the end, you're braver than most. Subscribe for more stories that'll keep you up. And maybe lock your doors tonight.